It was 11:45 at night. The Seattle rain was hammering against the corrugated metal of the shipping terminal, a sound I usually found comforting. But tonight, the only sound that mattered was the hum of my father's private server. I wasn't snooping. I was working. I was the head of logistics, the invisible hand that kept the family empire moving, and I was running a pre-audit sync. That is when I saw it. A flagged outbound transfer. Yesterday. Amount, $75,000. Recipient, BR Personal Holdings. That was Brandon, my fiance. My hand hovered over the mouse. I opened the memo line. It didn't say consulting fee. It read merger facilitation / Tiffany engagement. I stared at the glowing screen. My father hadn't just paid my fiance to leave me. He had used company funds to buy him for my cousin. Drop a comment below. If you found out your partner was paid to leave you, would you confront them immediately or would you disappear without a word? I want to know your move. Panic is a biological error. It disrupts the supply chain. Standing there in the cold server room, I felt the error trying to execute the urge to scream, to break the monitor, but I overrode it. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. I simply initiated the containment protocol. Grief is inefficient. Anger is a waste of capital. This was no longer a relationship. It was a failed shipment. And when a shipment is compromised, you don't mourn it. You write it off. You purge the inventory. The clock read 12:15 in the morning. I opened the command terminal on my laptop. I had built this system. I knew where every digital skeleton was buried. I navigated to my personal employee file, the years of optimization data I had built, the proprietary shipping codes I had written. I didn't steal them. I simply recalled them. My finger held down the delete key. One by one, the files vanished. The projections for the third quarter, gone. The union negotiation contacts, deleted. The logistics map that saved us $2 million last year, erased. By 12:30, my digital footprint was gone. I was a ghost in the machine I had built. The drive home was silent. The apartment was dark. Brandon wasn't there, likely out celebrating his new investment. I walked into the bedroom and pulled my suitcase from the closet. Not the big one, just the carry-on. The rule of logistics. Only transport high-value assets. I packed 3 suits, my laptop, and my passport. I left the photos, I left the dress, I left the life I thought I was building. At 3 a.m, I stood in the kitchen for the last time. I took the diamond ring off my finger. It felt heavy, like a shackle I hadn't realized I was wearing. I placed it on the granite counter. Next to it, I placed a single sheet of paper, the printout of the transaction. $75,000. I didn't write a note. I didn't write, I hate you or how could you. The receipt was the only statement necessary. At 4:30 in the morning, I was at SeaTac International Airport. I walked to the counter and bought the first ticket to the one place where my father's influence couldn't reach, a place I had been scouting for months, Dubai. As I sat at the gate, I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts. Dad, Brandon, Tiffany. I didn't block them. Blocking is emotional. It suggests you care enough to create a barrier. Instead, I deactivated my number entirely. I threw the SIM card into the trash can next to a half-eaten bagel. The boarding call came over the intercom. I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and walked down the jet bridge. I wasn't running away. I was simply rerouting the vessel. 15 hours in a metal tube gives you a lot of time to think. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the adrenaline that had fueled my escape began to wear off. The silence of the cabin replaced the frantic clicking of my keyboard, and for the first time since finding the receipt, the reality tried to break in. I stared at the flight map on the screen in front of me. 4,000 miles from Seattle. 4,000 miles from the wedding dress hanging in my closet. 4,000 miles from the father who sold me. My chest tightened. The biological error was returning. It would have been easy to let it out, to sob into the complimentary blanket and play the victim. But I closed my eyes and forced myself to do what I always did. I analyzed the data. Why? That was the question burning in my mind. Why would my father trade his most valuable asset for a merger with the failing branch of the family? I wasn't just his daughter. I was the operating system of his entire life. When the port strikes of 2021 paralyzed the supply chain, Robert was at the country club. I was the one sleeping on the office floor for 3 days straight, rerouting cargo through Vancouver, saving the company $2 million in late penalties. When Tiffany's father threatened to sue us over the warehouse rights, I was the one who found the loophole in the deed that made his claim worthless. I had given them my blood, my sweat, and my youth, and in exchange, they valued me at negative $75,000. They didn't just want me gone, they were willing to pay a premium to remove me. The tears threatened to spill again. But then, I performed an audit on my own heart. I visualized my emotions as a ledger. On the debit side was the grief, the heavy, useless cost of mourning people who didn't love me. On the credit side was my ambition, my intelligence, and the raw energy I had wasted trying to please them. I realized something in that dark cabin. Crying is an expenditure. It costs energy, it costs focus, and Brandon wasn't worth the expense. My father wasn't worth the depreciation of my mental state. So I made a choice. I wouldn't repress the pain, I would reallocate it. Every ounce of hurt I felt, I moved it from the grief column to the ambition column. The energy I was going to spend planning a wedding, reallocated to building a portfolio. The sleepless nights I would have spent crying, reallocated to learning the Asian markets. I didn't suppress the fire. I just changed what it was burning. By the time the pilot announced our descent, my eyes were dry. The plane banked, and I saw it out the window. Dubai, a city of gold and glass rising out of the sand. It looked nothing like the gray, rain-soaked streets of Seattle. It looked like the future. The cabin doors opened, and the desert heat hit me instantly, dry, intense, and cleansing. I walked down the stairs onto the tarmac, inhaling the hot air. I had left Seattle as a daughter and a fiance. I landed as an independent entity. The audit was complete. The past was written off. It was time to build. 3 years is a long time in the logistics world. In 3 years, shipping lanes change, fleets are retired, and empires rise or fall based on efficiency. For my family in Seattle, those 3 years were a slow, agonizing slide into obsolescence. For me, they were a masterclass in ascent. I didn't block them. I wanted to see the data. I treated their attempts to contact me like incoming distress signals from a sinking ship, informative, but not my problem to fix. Month 1, my father's emails were demanding. Kate, where are the authentication keys for the Maersk account? Stop being dramatic and pick up the phone. I moved them to a folder labeled spam. Month 6, Brandon texted. I know you were mad, but we need to talk. The merger isn't going as smoothly as we thought. Tiffany doesn't understand the back end. Just call me. I deleted it without opening the attachment. By year 2, the tone had shifted from anger to panic. Tiffany posted photos on Instagram of her perfect life, champagne toasts, the new house, the forced smiles. But her direct messages to me told a different story. Hey, Coz, long time no see. Listen, things are a little tight with the market downturn. Could you loan us $5,000 just until next month? I didn't respond. I simply liked her public photo of the champagne and went back to work. While they were drowning in the Seattle rain, I was thriving in the Dubai sun. I wasn't just an analyst anymore. I was the vice president of operations for one of the largest maritime tech firms in the Middle East. My portfolio wasn't managing a single family warehouse. I was overseeing trade routes worth $50 million a day. That is where I met Lucas. He wasn't like the men in Seattle. He didn't care about my last name or my father's country club membership. He was the CEO of a rival firm, a visionary who saw supply chains as art. We met at a trade conference in Abu Dhabi. He didn't compliment my dress. He complimented my keynote speech on automated port logistics. You see the invisible lines, he told me over coffee, that tasted like cardamom and success. Most people just see the ships. You see the flow. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being evaluated on my price tag. I was being valued for my mind. With Lucas's backing and my own capital, I started a side project, a holding company called Valkyrie Logistics. It was a ghost entity. No names attached, just capital and a mandate to acquire distressed assets. And the most distressed asset on the market was a mid-sized import firm in Seattle that was bleeding cash. My father's firm. It took me 6 months to buy up his outstanding loans. The bank was happy to offload the bad debt. They had no idea the buyer was the daughter he had exiled. I sat in my office on the 45th floor, looking out at the Burj Khalifa, piercing the sky. On my screen was the final deed of transfer. I wasn't just successful. I was now my father's landlord. I owned the warehouse he worked in. I owned the loans on his trucks. I owned the mortgage on the boat he used for his summer parties. He thought he had paid $75,000 to get rid of me. In reality, he had just sold me the keys to his kingdom. The only person in Seattle I hadn't erased from my life was Michael, my younger brother, the one who used to sneak me candy when our father sent me to my room without dinner for getting a B+. When his graduation invitation arrived, it wasn't a text. It was a physical card, heavy and expensive, inviting me to a celebration on the family yacht, the SS Legacy. I stared at the card on my glass desk. Going back meant breaking the seal. It meant seeing Robert, seeing Brandon, seeing Tiffany. But I looked at Lucas, who was reviewing a contract on the sofa. He nodded. He knew I needed to close the loop. We weren't going back to reconcile. We were going back to inspect our asset. 2 hours before our flight to Seattle, my head of legal walked into my office. He wasn't smiling. "We finished the forensic audit on your father's outstanding liabilities," he said, sliding a black folder across the desk. "You need to look at Schedule C." I opened the folder. It was a dense web of bad loans and leveraged assets, but highlighted in neon yellow was a transaction from 3 years ago, the exact date I left, the exact amount, $75,000. My blood ran cold. I had always assumed the money Robert paid Brandon came from his personal savings, or maybe a business account, but the source code on the transfer didn't match the general ledger. "It came from the employee pension fund," the lawyer said quietly. "He raided the retirement accounts of his warehouse workers to pay the bribe." I felt a surge of nausea. He stole from the men and women who had worked for him for 30 years, but the nausea vanished when I turned the page to the authorization form. To withdraw that amount of cash from a protected fund, you need 2 signatures, one from the CEO and one from the chief logistics officer. There, at the bottom of the page, was my father's signature, and right next to it was mine. I traced the ink with my finger. It was my name, Kate. But the loop on the K was too wide. The slant was wrong. I hadn't signed this. "He forged it," I whispered. The room went silent. My father hadn't just paid my fiancé to leave me. He had framed me for the theft. If the IRS ever audited the company, Robert could claim I stole the money and ran away to Dubai. He had set me up as the fall guy for his own corruption. I closed the folder. The sound was sharp, like a gunshot. The lingering sadness I felt about seeing my family evaporated instantly. This was no longer a family feud. It wasn't even a business acquisition anymore. It was a federal crime. I looked up at Lucas. "Pack the black suit," I said. "We are not going to a graduation party. We are going to a crime scene." The SS Legacy was bobbing gently in the Seattle harbor, lit up like a floating chandelier. It was the symbol of our family's projected wealth, loud, shiny, and leveraged to the hilt. 3 years ago, I would have walked up that gangplank, carrying a clipboard, checking the catering list, making sure Tiffany's wine glass was full. Tonight, I walked up in a black silk suit that cost more than Brandon's car. Lucas was on my arm, not as a prop, but as a partner. The silence hit the deck the moment we stepped aboard. Tiffany stopped mid-laugh. Her dress was beautiful, but her eyes were tired. Brandon was by the bar, looking heavier, the charm wearing thin around the edges like cheap plating. My father saw me first. He adjusted his tie, put on his CEO smile, and walked over. He looked older, The stress of the failing business was etched into the lines around his eyes. "Sarah," he said, using my full name, "I am glad you finally came to your senses. It is good to have you back." He didn't apologize. He didn't ask how I was. He went straight to the negotiation. "We can find a place for you," he continued, lowering his voice so the guests wouldn't hear. "A junior operations role. You will have to report to Tiffany, of course, since she is the director now. But we need the help. The shipping codes are a mess." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was a man drowning in an ocean he didn't understand, trying to throw a rope to the only person who knew how to swim, but still demanding she call him captain. "I didn't come for a job, Robert," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through the ambient jazz music. Brandon slid over, swirling his drink. "Come on, Kate. Don't be like that. We were all young. We made mistakes. Let's bury the hatchet. For the family." "I agree," I said. "Let's bury it." I turned to Lucas. "Dad, Brandon, I would like you to meet Lucas." My father extended his hand, dismissive. "Nice to meet you. What do you do? Tech support?" Lucas didn't shake his hand. He just smiled, a shark-like grin that I had grown to love. "I run Valkyrie Logistics, Robert. We specialize in distressed asset acquisition." My father's face went pale. The glass in his hand trembled. "Valkyrie? You are the one squeezing us on the warehouse loans." "We are," Lucas said smoothly. "And as of this morning, we acquired the note on this vessel. Technically, you are drinking champagne on my boat." The color drained from Brandon's face. Tiffany dropped her glass. It shattered on the teak deck, but no one moved to clean it up. "You did this?" my father whispered, looking at me with horror. "You bought my debt? Why? Why would you destroy your own family?" "I didn't destroy anything," I said, stepping closer. "I just bought the dip." "I don't understand," he stammered. I thought you were just what? Just the girl who fixed the spreadsheets? Just the daughter who would always be there?" I let the silence hang for a second before I delivered the truth he had been blind to for 29 years. "It is called the proximity paradox, Dad. You couldn't see my value because I was standing too close to you. You mistook my loyalty for a lack of ambition. You thought because I was free labor, I was cheap labor. You didn't pay Brandon $75,000 to take me away. You paid him to remove the only asset that was keeping this entire family afloat." He flinched as if I had slapped him. "But that is just business," I continued, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Business I can forgive, but the pension fund? That is not business. That is a felony." His eyes widened in genuine terror. "Kate, keep your voice down." I saw the withdrawal slip, Dad. I saw the signature. You didn't just sell me out. You forged my name to rob your own workers so you could pay for this wedding. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a photocopy of the forged slip. I held it up. "I own the boat. I own the warehouse. And right here, I own your freedom." The silence on the deck was absolute. Even the jazz band had stopped playing. My father stared at the photocopy in my hand, his face a mask of ruin. He opened his mouth to beg, to explain, to offer some pathetic excuse about how he intended to pay it back. I raised a hand. "Save it. I am not interested in your excuses. I am interested in your compliance." I handed him the paper. He took it with shaking hands. "You have 30 days, Robert," I said, my voice steady. 30 days to liquidate your personal assets, the house, the cars, the country club membership, and replenish the employee pension fund. Every single cent. "But that will bankrupt me," he whispered. "No," I corrected him. "You bankrupted yourself 3 years ago. I am just auditing the books." I leaned in closer. "If the fund isn't whole in 30 days, the original copy of this document goes to the district attorney. And unlike you, I don't forge signatures. I deliver evidence." I stepped back. The negotiation concluded. I took Lucas's arm. We turned to leave. As we walked toward the gangplank, Brandon stepped into my path. He looked desperate, sweating through his expensive suit. "Kate," he said, his voice cracking, "please." "Tiffany," She is drowning me in debt. This isn't the life I wanted. We could start over. I looked at him and I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no longing, just the mild indifference you feel when looking at a bad investment you were smart enough to sell before the crash. You wanted the merger, Brandon, I said simply. You took the $75,000, you bought the ticket, now you have to take the ride. I walked past him, leaving him standing next to Tiffany, two people trapped in a gilded cage of their own making. They would spend the rest of their lives blaming each other for a misery they had purchased at a premium. Lucas and I walked down the ramp and onto the Seattle dock. The rain had started again. But for the first time in my life, it didn't feel cold. It didn't feel like the gray gloom that used to suffocate me. It felt clean. It felt like a washdown after a long haul. I pulled my phone from my pocket. A notification flashed on the screen from the bank. Transfer complete, asset acquisition finalized. I opened my photo gallery. I found the image I had looked at every single day for 3 years. The photo of the receipt, the $75,000 price tag my father had put on my worth. I looked at it one last time. I didn't need the reminder anymore. I didn't need the motivation. My value wasn't determined by their appraisal. It was determined by my own equity. My thumb hovered over the trash icon. Ready? Lucas asked, opening the car door. Ready, I said. I tapped the screen. Delete. The image vanished. The debt was settled. The books were balanced. I got into the car, and we drove away from the harbor, leaving the sinking ship behind us in the dark. Kate turned her pain into profit, but not everyone gets that chance. If you held the leverage to destroy the person who betrayed you, would you pull the trigger, or would you just walk away? Tell me in the comments. And share this story if you know your worth.